welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach, the American. And growing up, my mom always said I had to be home when the moment the streetlights came on. That was the rule.
And I'm Rachel, the Brit, and I would always come in at 9 or 10. But it was pretty safe back in the 90s, so we were a bit naughty, out drinking, a bit of White Lightning and Lambrini. And that was the stuff back in the day.
That's gross.
Bit Mad Dog 2020, actually. I quite like that.
Ooh, Mad Dog. Well, anyways, this case is about one teenager who went out late one night and never made it home.
Late afternoon, Sunday, 25th of August, 1996. The River Leven moves slow under the Black Bridge, the towpath quiet, the school playground across the water, still. A passerby notices a pair of trainers on the grass, then something darker in the shallows.
Face down at the edge is a girl, 14 years old. A 999 call follows. Within minutes, the quiet stretch between Bon Hill and Renton is no longer ordinary. This is where Caroline Glachan's Saturday plans end and where our story begins.
The Vale of Leven sits between Loch Lomond and the River Clyde in Scotland, a short, settled valley where 5 places run into one another: Balloch, Jamestown, Alexandria, Bon Hill, and Renton. The River Leven, about 6 miles from Loch to Clyde, cuts through the middle.
Bridges stitch the banks together. Paths follow the water. In 1996, the cast iron crossings locals called the Black Bridge or Dillichip was part of everyday movement, a foot route between Bon Hill and Renton, used so often it barely registered as a landmark.
The area's shape comes from industry. Through the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Vale was a powerhouse for bleaching, dyeing and printing, internationally known for the permanent turkey red process. Where it was clustered along the river, service tracks and haul bridges fed them. The riverbank was an industrial corridor.
When heavy industry declined after the mid-century, infrastructure remained. Towpaths became public walkways, and former works named Dillichip Cordale stayed on maps and in conversation. By the 1990s, you could still read that history and how people moved. Quick crossings, riverside shortcuts, and short walks between housing and shops.
Well, post-war planning added to the hillsides. Housing schemes on the Bon Hill side, Ladyton among them, were built with small shopping parades. Schools, bus stops within a couple of minutes' walk. The intent was local self-containment. In practice, it meant a predictable triangle of home to shops to friends all on foot.
Across the water, Renton kept its long main streets and terraces. With infill and redevelopment through the 1960s and 70s, the two banks faced each other across a narrow span of water. Daily life crossed and recrossed accordingly.
Distances were modest enough to feel routine. From Ladyton Shopping Centre, which is in Bon Hill, to the Black Dillichip Bridge is comfortably under about 15 minutes at normal pace. From the bridge down to the quieter bend by the Place of Bon Hill stretch is just a few minutes more along the towpath.
From Allen Crescent in Renton up to the bridge, the walk is likewise under 15 minutes, mostly level. None of these trips required planning, money, or lifts. They were the kind of movements measured by habit rather than schedules.
Caroline Glachan was born on 8th of January 1982. By the summer of 1996, she lived with her family in Bon Hill and attended Our Lady and St Patrick's High School in Dumbarton, a Catholic comprehensive drawing pupils from the Vale and beyond.
At 14, she sat at the S3, S4 band heading towards standard grades. Independence was increasing, but bounded. Curfews, lifts when needed, buses for school, and walkable evenings that began and ended close to home.
The same geography stretched. Check who's about at the shops, cross to the other bank if that's where people are, and back in time without a formal plan. In 1996, this ran largely without mobile phones, payphones, and door knocks did as much organising as any handset. And public space CCTV wasn't standard on river paths.
Caroline's social world overlapped both banks because the valley is small and the catchment broad. Names traveled easily through friends of friends. You recognize people by sight well before you learned surnames.
Ordinary addresses did the work of meeting points. Ladyton, Bonhill for snacks and talks, the bridge for crossing, a babysitting flat, or a pal's living room for TV and waiting on a lift.
That sounds familiar.
I mean, back in the day,
them old days.
Yeah, I think we just hopped on our bike and, rode to our friends' houses and just knocked them up, really. We didn't,
Yeah.
We didn't have the phones to be like, oh, or it would be landline. You had the landline.
Hey, where are you at?
But then it's whether you could use that landline. I remember running up a phone bill on my mum's landline. Oh my God, she killed me.
I just remember, like, you get on your bike and then you just like, where are all the other bikes at?
Yeah.
Which yard are they in? And that's where all your friends were.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But Caroline's vulnerabilities were the ordinary ones at age and place. She didn't drive. She relied on pavements, or what I would say, sidewalk. Buses and familiar footpaths is what she used. Most social time took place in public or semi-public spaces, shop fronts, doorways, bridge approaches, and the riverside path. Within earshot of houses and traffic, the distances were short. The routes were known by heart. Adults could picture a teenager's likely path without looking at a clock.
Well, the wider peer set included slightly older teens moving through the same geography. Robert O'Brien, 18, Donna Marie Brand, who was 17, and Andrew Kelly, 16, were part of the overlapping circle.
It came out later that Caroline was in a sexual relationship with Robert O'Brien, even as he was also seeing Donna Brand. Brand knew about Caroline and O'Brien's involvement, and that tension became part of the case. In a compact place, relationships form because of proximity. You meet the same people at the same parades, pass them on the bridge, and see them again on the towpath. Who spends time with whom can change quickly across a term, but the locations do not.
The towpath itself is a small but distinctive landscape feature. It sits just below road level and near housing, yet can feel quite visually sheltered. Under the bridge arch, sound behaves oddly. Voices flatten and echo along the water more than they carry up the road.
In late summer, the Leven often runs low. Stones show at the edge, and the slope down from the path to the water is only a step or two. For locals, that mix read as ordinary, not remote. Close to home, but screened enough that you notice the difference in footing and acoustics.
Local services reinforced the near-at-hand rhythm. Buses linked the Vales villages to Dumbarton and Glasgow. Trains ran from Alexandria and Balloch. Most errands didn't require either. Policing in 1996 fell under Strathclyde Police before national unification in 2013.
So for everyday life, that meant officers who knew the regular meeting points and could seal a location quickly if needed, while detectives handled methodical tasks like house-to-house and exhibit logging. None of that altered the routine evenings. It just meant response infrastructure was nearby.
The industrial past still framed identity. Even as mills had closed or changed use, the valley's story was tied to textiles and to the river that powered them. Landmarks, Dilly Chip Works, Cordale, lingered in place names. Former service tracks became foot-routes.
A pedestrian iron bridge sat where wagons once moved. The sense of a place built for movement stayed, and that mattered to how teenagers navigated a Saturday night. Short, legible routes, repeated crossings, and plans that could be altered on the walk.
Well, late August brought its own rhythm. Holidays were ending, evenings were still light, the air was warm enough to keep people outside. Streetlights set soft boundaries. The reflective deck of the bridge felt public and safe. The path below was familiar. Parents could estimate travel time by instinct, from Ladyton to the bridge, from the bridge to a friend's close, and back again, all in the space of an hour.
Set against this backdrop, Saturday, the 24th of August, 1996 began as one more ordinary night in a small valley. The places that will matter were not unusual destinations. They were the default routes.
A shopping strip on one side, a footbridge in the middle, and the path that runs between them. Caroline moved within the same compact geography as everyone her age. A few minutes on foot to see someone, a crossing to meet others, and home by the route that you already knew.
Nothing in the layout suggested a break from routine. The bridge functioned as it always had, the shops as social magnets, the towpath as a link between them.
The school timetable, the bus routes, the housing estates with their parades, each piece contributed to a map where distances were short, decisions had to be face-to-face. In that practical, well-worn setting, a plan to meet someone near the bridge counted as entirely normal.
So hold that picture. Compact valley, short routes, familiar crossings, and a 14-year-old's ordinary independence. It is the frame of the case because it was the frame of the veil. A place where everyday life is built from small movements, where names and faces repeat across both banks, and where a late summer evening can be charted in minutes rather than miles.
Saturday, 24th of August, 1996 was ordinary from the start. Afternoon slipped into evening across the vale. Small groups drifted between doorways and shop fronts, plans forming by proximity rather than design. By late evening, Caroline was on the Renton side of that loop, doing what teenagers did, standing about with friends, deciding whether to stay put or cross over.
At about 10:30 p.m., she was seen near the Ladyton Shopping Centre in Bon Hill. Nothing about it stood out. A familiar face in a familiar spot. A few words, the nod that says you're heading somewhere else when they say, right.
Yeah, right. That means you're leaving
Right.
or like, you know, it's time to go.
Right. The intention was straightforward. Meet a boy she knew at the cast iron crossing everyone used.
Well, she set off towards the Black Bridge. Two acquaintances fell into step for part of the walk, the kind of escort that lasts until the route forces a choice.
At the span that separated, the others continued across. Caroline turned down onto the towpath alone, the way you do when you're sure of who's waiting. She said she'd be fine because he was there.
Well, midnight came and went. The river ran low, the stones at the edge showing through. Footfall on the path had softened, where dust became grit and then gave in onto the bank.
This stretch is close to houses and the road above. And yet, once you've left the bridge behind, there are seconds at a time when you're screened by the bend and the growth along the verge. It doesn't feel remote. It just feels tucked away.
From that towpath, the water to the water's edge is only a step or two. A meeting here would be quick, first recognition, then words, then the small distance closing. There isn't much space to sidestep. The drop to the stones is shallow in late summer. It takes more balance and effort to keep your foot in.
What happened next took very little time and very little ground. Caroline was subjected to repeated blows to the head, sufficient to render her unconscious.
She ended up face down at the bank, at the line where water touches stone. In the language that followed later, multiple blunt force head injuries, death by drowning thereafter. The sequence is plain, blows first, water last.
The strip where it happened is narrow. Underfoot, the signs that matter are the small ones. Scuffed earth, where shoes turned, compressed grass, stones disturbed in a short run towards the edge.
Well, there was no sign of a careful staging, no brush dragged over, but no attempt to carry her elsewhere. If you look at the logic of the ground, it says the confrontation began just off the path and moved a few steps downward into the bight where the bank gives way.
Her footwear was not where it would be if she had walked away. A pair of trainers laid up on the grass, close enough together to catch the eye of passing people.
Well, clothing matched a warm August night. Nothing for distance, nothing for weather, nothing that implies planning for more than a short walk or a quick meet. The fact that the shoes were on the grass and she was at the edge is a contrast that you feel before you can explain.
No one on the upper road would have seen much. The embankment and angle kept the towpath largely hidden unless you're already on it. Sound, though, can travel in hard-to-read ways near the bridge.
Well, voices flatten and reflect. The arch turns some words to blur and carries others further than you'd expect. If anyone did hear sharp noises in that window, it did not travel upward with enough clarity to draw a crowd.
Yeah, that sounds like it's they knew the place so well. They knew a good place to, do something like this, doing something nefarious.
Yeah, I think, as much as it's quite in the vicinity of houses and it still does sound very quite isolated in certain spots.
Yeah, and like they knew, hey, this spot right here is hidden enough to where we can do what we need to do. And their nasty plan. So obviously local people that know this place well. So that's scary.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the darkness after midnight, the short strip of water and stones settled back into quiet. There were no lights set for the path, just what spills from the ends of the crossing. And even that turns patchy as you move away. The space that felt tucked away felt empty again.
Well, morning came without answers. The river moves the same whether anyone is watching it or not. A handful of dog walkers used the path at different times. A few people would cut across the bridge. Most of the Vale did what the Vale does on a Sunday. Late breakfasts, lifts, errands, kids in and out of nearby houses. The bank held its secret without effort.
Oh yeah, wait for that Sunday roast.
Yep. An easy Sunday morning, just, indoors, taking it, probably not even getting dressed.
Yeah.
Sunday's
Lazy
all
Sunday.
about.
Well, in the early afternoon of Sunday, the 25th of August, a passerby noticed the two trainers on the grass, and beyond them, something dark in the shallows. The water was low enough that color under the surface shifted as the angle changed.
A step closer removed any doubt. A young girl lay face down, head towards the bank, feet angled downstream. The call that followed was short and controlled. The kind of call where the caller already knows help will not change the fact that's being reported.
Yeah, and that's so sad. Like, knowing that you can't rush to help.
Yeah.
You already know that it's over. That's sad. But the position at the edge fixes the scene. This is a way people look when they've fallen, and in a way they look when they've been left. This was the latter. Clothing sat where it would if you'd been brought down fast and in close quarters.
Well, the rest of the ground read as though no one had stayed to make sense of it. In a place where the river is part of the background of life, the river had become, for that afternoon, the whole frame.
Word traveled the usual way in a small valley. One person who had been nearby told another who would care. A relative rang a relative. A neighbor knocked on a door and asked if anyone had heard.
Younger children were steered away from the towpath. Parents called out from the windows. The ordinary foot traffic on that section eased to nothing. You could stand at the bridge and look down and know something grave had happened without anyone saying exactly what.
The facts that can be seen without taking sides are stark. The person at the water's edge was 14 years old and had suffered blunt force injuries before ending up in the water. The time between the last normal sighting at Ladyton and the appearance near midnight at the crossing is short enough to measure in a few songs worth of walking. The distance from path to stones is smaller still.
The footwear on the grass sits apart from the body at the edge. The disturbed strip between path and bank is short. The river level is low enough that the shallows show. None of that tells you who did what. All of it tells you where something happened and how close it was to where anyone in the Vale might walk on a late summer night.
It is tempting, in hindsight, to push meaning into small details, to explain why the trainers were where they were, or to assign intent to the exact angle of the body. The way to resist that is to stick to what the ground will bear. Got to get that investigation.
Yeah.
They do all the scuff marks and tracks and everything.
It would be to sort of check to see whether there's evidence that, she's been dragged to this position. Did she fall? Is there evidence that she just, somehow falled into the water?
Or maybe she had a medical emergency or something,
just
passed out and fell down.
I mean, it depends, obviously, in the order because obviously if she was, struck over the back of the head, then, had they seen that straight away, then obviously it would rule out just an accident, it would point more to something.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking, like, as you're like, oh gosh, did something happen? Like she fall over and hit her head and then accidentally drown?
Yeah.
But then once you get up on it, oh
yeah,
goodness.
I think as you approach the scene, I think they would be looking all around, at grass areas to see whether there's drag marks and things. But as they reach the body and get closer, they would obviously then see, she had some terrible injuries to her head. So
Yeah.
the ground says that there was a brief violent encounter at the river's edge. It says no one took time to hide it. It states that the difference between walking and drowning is not always distance. Sometimes it is one stride down.
People in the surrounding streets didn't need official language to know the day had changed. The towpath is a route many had used the night before. The crossing stands where it has always stood.
The place where travellers on foot disappear for a few seconds behind a bend is the same place they reappear to cross home. On this Sunday, the gap between those 2 points held a reality it should never have had to hold.
By the time afternoon shifted toward evening, the scene's outlines were already fixed in the minds of those who had seen it or heard enough to picture it. A girl who had set out from Ladyton to meet someone she knew had ended at the waterline within walking distance of her house. The space between those states, familiar and catastrophic, was measured in minutes, and in the short drop from the towpath to the stones.
There's nothing in this account that requires you to know more than the route, the hour, and the position in which Caroline was found. It is in the simplest version because simple is all the ground allows. A late summer night, a familiar path, a meeting that became an assault, and the quiet that followed until a passerby saw 2 shoes in the grass and something darker just beyond.
Sunday afternoon turned the towpath into a controlled space. Tape went up from the bridge down to the bend. A log started. Photographs fixed the bank where a hand touched it. Searchers worked the slopes in lanes, lifting what sat on or just below the tide line.
The stick taken from the shallows was bagged and booked. The 2 trainers that had first caught the passerby's eyes were documented where they lay, then removed. Notes described a short strip of disturbed ground, the sort of scuff and compression you get when feet struggle for balance on loose stones.
While the riverbank was being gridded, the canvas pushed outward on both banks. Officers worked stairwells, shop doors, and bus stops asking for simple things. Who was out late? Who took the bridge? Who saw Caroline after 10:30?
2 independent sightings fell into place. Caroline at the Ladyton shops around 10:30 p.m. and a lone girl heading towards the Black Bridge shortly after midnight. Neither was treated as more than a clock hand. They were enough to mark a window.
The next addresses were the ones teenagers used on Saturday nights. In Allen Crescent in Renton, a babysitting flat became a point of attention. An upstairs neighbor said 4 teenagers left the flat with 2 small children before midnight. Man, I'm in bed by like 10:30. I wouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wasn't raking around at that time back in the 90s. I mean, I'd still be awake, but I'd be indoors. I mean, I wouldn't be going out meeting people. And
yeah, but then it also, this shows like kind of a small town atmosphere where people are like, oh, who's that?
This is the thing. The small, back in England and, back in the 90s, look, I grew up in a village and, this sounds like quite a small villagey type place. And, everybody knew everybody. If there was anything that you just didn't feel unsafe because everybody knew everybody,
Yeah.
Quite close near.
Which this makes it scarier because she wasn't far from home.
Exactly. But
like,
then it
gosh,
also makes you think, well, it would have been, most likely somebody that she knew. So even more terrible.
That's usually what it usually turns out to be is people get murdered by the people they knew.
Yeah, or have some sort of connection with somebody.
Yeah.
Who commits the crimes. The statistics are really there to show that 9 times out of 10 there is some way a connection between perpetrator and victim. But I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, whether it's more scary if it's done by a stranger, complete stranger.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty out there that you do not know these people. But then, it goes down to the trust in the people you do know. There's always that, because of the statistics of a connection between perpetrators being people they know in some way or another, it's quite scary.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, someone came to the flat, arriving at about 12:30 a.m. and found lights on, but no one answered the door. Later in the small hours, the same group was seen returning. Those times were written down as their own facts, separate from any explanation.
Inside the flat, the small details mattered. Andrew Kelly's trousers were hanging to dry on the fire guard. A damp patch marked the living room carpet. When asked, Kelly said a child had urinated on the carpet and on his clothes. The child said no, he didn't do that. Officers didn't have to decide which version they believed. They recorded both and moved on.
By Monday morning, one of the children from the flat, 4.5-year-old Archie Wilson, made an unprompted remark at home about being down at the Leven and seeing a girl attacked. Detectives moved to formalise what he could give. He was interviewed on tape on Monday the 26th of August. A second attempt on Tuesday was abandoned because he became distressed.
Or a little guy.
I mean, 4.5 years old, it's going to be quite scary talking to police and about things
like
he may have seen.
Big adults with uniforms and that,
I mean, back in the 90s,
plain clothes.
We had, obviously, it's not like it is now. We had actual a police officer that everybody knew. They were kind of like allocated to the village. They kind of covered everything that happened in the village, and they were very much. I mean, I remember them coming round and sitting up at the kitchen table having a cup of tea with my mum. They were very much
integrated into the community.
Yeah, so I think, if he's this poor little boy, if he's being interviewed, say, at a police station, then obviously different setting, scary sort of setting, really, then, you can imagine him being slightly terrified.
Yeah.
But, just...
And scary questions and...
Yeah, and I mean, at that age, I mean, he would have been scared by what he saw, is he...
Yeah.
He's going to be quite scared to actually acknowledge and talk about seeing something like that, especially if it's caused him to feel scared, so.
Yeah.
Poor little boy.
Well, after they abandoned that interview, they went on to interview him again on the 25th of September. So this session recorded extra detail in his own words. A stick used at the river, a metal pole in the house, stones thrown at the girl, and one boy falling into the water. None of this was treated as a conclusion on its own. The value was whether parts of it matched what could be seen and what could be found. Stones at the edge, a stick taken from the shallows, wet clothing, and a wet patch back at Allen Crescent.
Well, there were no cameras on that stretch of path in 1996, and the kind of phone location data that now fills gaps did not exist for a teenager on foot. The inquiry stayed old-fashioned, witness time, scene notes, exhibits kept intact.
Police circulated a description of a hooded figure seen trailing a girl on the approach. It didn't produce a name. It did keep attention on the bridge to towpath corridor and encouraged anyone who had walked it near midnight to come forward.
Appeals and anniversaries over the following years added information the way a wolf feels, one detail at a time. A bus time fixed a sighting. A TV schedule made sense of a 12:30 doorstep. A clothing description stitched two separate glimpses together. Nothing rearranged the board. It did make it harder for a single story. We never left to sit comfortably against independent timings.
1996 offered little beyond people and what they remembered. The towpath had no CCTV, as we said. The mobile phones, where they existed, were basic and sparsely used. Oh yeah, I'm thinking of the old Nokia.
Yeah, what is it, 6210 or something? Was it 6210, 8210? Something like that.
They're just bricks that always worked.
The only thing you can do is play Snake on it.
Yeah, that was the game, baby. But there was no cell site map to lay over a walk. Forensics could preserve, describe, and sometimes test, but not conjure a profile from every surface.
Well, the advantage the case eventually gained wasn't a new technology. It was the fact that the original inquiry had kept its exhibits and its tape, and that time allowed investigators to re-ask questions of people who were ready to answer them.
And this took a long time, unfortunately. They just couldn't gather enough, but that re-asking became the point in 2019 when Police Scotland's major investigation team reopened the file. Detectives reread the 1996 statements, walked the approach routes to the bridge, and spoke to more than 200 people, many of whom had gone on record the first time.
Well, the aim was not to hunt for a single dramatic witness. It was to fill as many minutes as possible between 10:30 at Ladyton and 1 a.m. at the river, and to place the Allen Crescent movements inside that span without leaning on hearsay.
Where memory frayed, they triangulated. A program start or finish time anchored the 12:30 doorstep. Shop closing times and bus timetables fixed someone else's return. Weather and light helped explain why a detail was or wasn't noticed.
Well, when two independent pieces pointed to the same 5-minute slot, the slot stayed. When they didn't, it moved down a rung and waited for better support.
So handling of the riverbank items stayed cautious. The stick taken from the shallows was photographed, described, and retained. It did not yield a fresh, decisive DNA profile. Its value was positional. It existed close to where the struggle had marked the ground and matched an element from the earliest child account.
The trainers were documented for location and orientation relative to the path. Measurements confined the assault zone to a few square meters just below the towpath, consistent with an encounter that began at the footway and moved a short distance downward.
When the officers finally moved, they did so on the strength of that joined picture. In November 2021, 3 suspects, Robert O'Brien, Andrew Kelly, and Donna Marie Brand, were arrested, processed separately, and interviewed under caution. Searches were conducted for retained and historical material.
The case reported to prosecutors was lean by design, a stable timeline built from independent sightings, preserved statements and recordings from 1996, more than 200 fresh witness accounts, and a handful of exhibits whose value lay not in laboratory drama, but in where they were and how they fitted the ground.
Okay, so throughout, the tone stayed the same. Keep to what can be shown and stop where the facts stop. Who was where and when? What was seen and what was heard?
What was recovered and where? What was said in 1996 and again, more than 20 years later? Read together, those limits were the strength. They left a short window, a short strip of path, and a small set of people moving in and out of both.
Glasgow's High Court sat at the end of November of 2023, with Lord Braid presiding. In the dock were the 3 names the Vale already knew: Robert, Andrew, and Donna.
Each faced a single count, murder, alleged to have been carried out together. The indictment did not sprawl. It pointed at a narrow place, a narrow time, and a group acting as one.
Alex Prentice, KC, opened for the Crown with a promise of structure rather than spectacle. Jurors, he said, would hear medical findings of repeated blows to Caroline's head and drowning as the final mechanism. They would hear civilian evidence that fixed people close to the towpath in the critical minutes.
They would have placed before them the preserved interviews of a child recorded in 1996, and they would hear limited background about the relationships that explained why these faces were together in the first place. It was a compact case by design.
The pathology evidence set the physical boundaries. The experts described injuries that would have rapidly taken consciousness and left little chance of defense, followed by water inhalation that ended life.
There was no argument about distance or duration. The violence had been brief and close. Jurors were told not to look for a long chase or a hidden cache, but for a short event on a short strip of ground.
So the witnesses followed. They did not build a police timeline. They told the court what they saw and when. The value lay in those independent pieces sat behind one another.
No one was asked to solve the case from the witness box. Each placed a person, a sound, or a movement in a small window around midnight near the river crossing and then left the picture for others to complete.
The 1996 child interviews were presented in the form the law allows. Recordings and transcripts made at the time, admitted with care. Jurors heard the words used at the time and the context in which they were taken. The judge would later remind them how to weigh such material cautiously in the round and in the light of everything else before they returned the verdict.
Linked to that framework, the Crown set a few pieces of context it said mattered. There was evidence of O'Brien's behaviour towards Caroline during the short period that they were together, and a threat that Brand had made in the weeks before the killing.
The prosecutor didn't pretend those items proved the charge on their own, but they explained the proximity and the hostility, the ordinary reasons people meet at a bridge at midnight and do not reconcile.
The defence case kept two themes, denial and distance. Counsel stressed that there wasn't no towpath, CCTV, no decisive DNA on a weapon, and the risks of leaning too heavily on memories that had aged nearly 3 decades, particularly the words of a very young child.
Even if the panel were to accept that the accused were present somewhere in the wider scene, the defense said, presence is not participation. The law requires proof that each accused took part in a shared criminal purpose. Teen bravado, loose talk, and proximity are not enough. Which I get.
Understandable, yeah.
It's like you don't have any like direct
evidence,
red-handed proof, but once you put all the pieces together, it makes a picture of showing, you did do it. So.
Well, before sending the jury out, Lord Braid laid down the law in plain terms. In Scotland, murder can be proved by wicked intent to kill or by wicked recklessness, conduct that shows utter disregard for whether a victim lives or dies. Where 2 or more people act together in a common criminal purpose, the doctrine of concert may apply. If one delivers the fatal blows, all who participate in that joint attack can be guilty of murder.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty much saying, like, if someone's beating somebody and you throw one rock at it, you're in.
Yeah.
You're just as guilty, even though you only did one thing or did one kick or one punch.
That you didn't like directly result in her death, but at the end of the day, because you were there and you took part in the assault, then whether that be one rock or 10, you are still liable.
Yeah, still contributed to that person's death in some way. I know it does border on the, guilty by association sometimes, but you didn't stop it either. You threw a rock and was egging it on and having a great time, doing it. And then she gets killed and you're like, oh, well, shit, I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Well, that's too bad. You shouldn't have been doing it.
Exactly. You should have been telling the other person, stop doing this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyways, he explained how to approach prior statements, how corroboration works, and how to treat inconsistencies. It was for the jury, no one else, to decide what they believed, what they rejected, and what inferences the whole picture permitted them beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, the panel retired. When they came back on the 14th of December in 2023, the moment was brief. The 4-person announced 3 verdicts. Guilty for O'Brien, guilty for Kelly, and guilty for Brand. The clerk recorded the decisions. There was little noise, and the case moved at once into the business of sentence.
Punishment was dealt with in 2 stages. The 15th of January 24, O'Brien and Kelly stood together. Lord Braid spoke first about the facts that governed his task. A girl of 14 attacked near midnight on a public path, struck repeatedly into the head, left face down in the water's edge, and drowned.
He called the killing brutal, praved, and above all wicked. Age at the time, 18 and 16 was noted. The passage of years since 1996 was also noted. Neither cut the gravity, though, of what the jury had found. O'Brien received life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years before he could seek parole. Kelly received life with a minimum term of 18 years.
Oh, I think O'Brien was 22 years, actually. Yeah. Minimum term for O'Brien was 22 years. Ooh,
Yeah.
Goodness. Not enough, in my opinion. Just beating a girl to death beating her and leaving her to drown. Should never be able to get out. But Donna Brand returned to court on the 22nd of April in 24. After further reports, the judge accepted that she had not delivered the blows, but reminded the court and the public that the jury had convicted on the basis of a group attack. So you were all in it together.
Yeah. Well, under concert, her presence and participation in a common criminal purpose made her responsible for the murder too. So the judge, he imposed life imprisonment with a minimum term of 17 years.
In delivering these numbers, Lord Braid repeated the point about the minimum terms are and are not. A punishment part reflects retribution and deterrence for a crime of exceptional seriousness. Yeah, that's pretty fucking serious.
They are quite long sentences, to be fair. Well, I mean, obviously, there was such a long gap of the time that the crime happened to obviously sentencing these individuals.
Yeah.
So, obviously, they weren't no longer 18 and 16 and 17.
Yeah.
So, I'm guessing the judge would have took that into consideration as well, that, given, say, if they're...
Well, they'd gotten away with it.
Yeah, essentially. Essentially. And then obviously after their death, so their ages now, probably 30s, 40s, and then having, they're not going to be able to be released until in their sort of 50s, 60s, who knows? So
yeah,
they definitely won't be leaving until they're older. Like retirement age.
Yeah.
So, which is a good thing. It is a good thing. It doesn't set a release date. That's that question. If and when it ever arises, it will lie with the parole board after the minimum term has been served and in light of risk at the time.
Yeah, I think they're going to be into their 60s by then. I don't think they're going to be much of a risk at that point.
No, but I think also, depending on how their behaviour is while they're incarcerated, if they assault anybody in there, then obviously they'll be charged and sentenced for stuff like that as well. So who knows? They may never get out.
Yeah. So members of Caroline's family were present. There were tears when the verdicts were read and again when the sentences were pronounced.
The senior officers asked how a 1996 murder had produced 3 life sentences in the 2020s without a single decisive lab result. Said the answer was method. Keep the exhibits, keep the tapes, and keep asking until the pieces sit together. Don't give up.
That's true. Like how, they don't give up. And it, like, they were just going over it and over it and over it. It's just like trying to fit these puzzle pieces together. And it finally clicked everything together to where they could finally charge them. The post-trial steps moved quickly in the background. Notices of appeal were lodged. Challenges brought by Kelly and Brand were later refused, leaving the convictions and minimum terms undisturbed.
The written record that remains is spare: a narrow place by a river, a narrow window around midnight, and a finding that 3 people acted together in a way that meets Scotland's definition of murder. The law did not need to locate every footfall. It needed to know, beyond reasonable doubt, what was done and by whom. On that test, the jury was sure.
In the Vale of Leven, remembrance became practical. On the 20th anniversary in 2016, parliamentarians lodged an early day motion that called Caroline's murder an appalling crime, praised the local #JusticeForCaroline campaign, and urged residents to speak to police.
Appeals and anniversary pieces kept the case present. People who hadn't talked in 1996 came forward later. The bridge, the towpath, and the Leighton Parade are ordinary places turned into markers where flowers and notes appeared, not for spectacle, but because that's where everyday life had passed her last.
The major investigative team, they reopened the file in 2019, reread every statement, rewalked the route, and took on those 200 fresh statements. And that's, I think, obviously helped piece it together a lot better for them. And then they were really able to fit that picture together. And there was no single forensic rescue and no towpath CCTV to reconstruct a walk. So the case moved because exhibits had been kept, interviews had been preserved, and a discipline timeline exposed an alibi that didn't survive contact with independent timings.
Well, that template preserved everything. Label it properly and expect people to talk later, even if they won't today. Now sits behind other Scottish cold case reviews. It's not glamorous, but it works.
For the family, the public message was steady and clear. After the sentencing, Caroline's mom, Margaret McKeach, thanked investigators and prosecutors and said justice had finally been done, even if it could not repair what was lost, an acknowledgement of the works and of its limits. Man, she never gave up. I watched some stuff and she never gave up. She never stopped. She never stopped talking about it. And she was just always out there pushing it. And she, amazing.
That's the plight of any parent, I think. I think the tragicness of losing a child would just spur you to seek justice no matter how long it takes.
Yep.
You will not give up. Nothing brings the child back. What does endure is the insistence that Caroline will be remembered as a person in a community she belonged to, and that those who helped move the case, witnesses, reporters, officers, be recognised for staying with it.
A final note is local rather than cinematic. The bridge that once carried footfall was dismantled in 2014. The stone piers remain. The towpath still threads the riverbank.
Caution the veil carries forward is simple and grounded. Danger isn't necessarily distant or anonymous. Sometimes it walks the same shortcuts, waits at the same crossing, and is also known by name.
Well, that was The Girl in the River and the Murder of Caroline Glachan.
Bless her heart. Such a sad case.
I'm just glad that they got him, especially for her mom, because, sometimes it goes on too long and parents pass away, old age or a sickness, and they don't get a chance to see that justice. But thankfully, the police never stop. There's still...
Even cold cases from sort of, I've seen many cold cases that have been reopened after sort of 70 years, and they do not quit on them. They do pick them back up and do continually, take fresh eyes at them, and different people, different officers, have a fresh set of eyes and kind of go through them again and can pick out things that, maybe other officers didn't quite catch back in the day. And so, I think that no matter what, the truth will always come out, no matter the time that passes.
I mean, look, when we did that Harold Jones one, and they were testing that stuff for the Muriel Drinkwater case. That was, a 70-something-year-old piece of DNA. They're like, they don't stop.
No.
So
it's great that
if you think you got away with something, at some point it's coming for you.
Yeah. I think, if you do something horrendous like this, always look over your shoulder. If you think you're getting away with it, think again. You will be looking over your shoulder until you're caught.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks guys for listening. Please follow us and also give us a like, comment, 5-star rating would be great. It helps others to find us within the whole algorithm. You can find us at Murder Most British on Instagram, TikTok, and MMB Podcast on Facebook.
Yeah. Come find us. Talk about it. Comment. Tell us what you think. Anything helps. We'd love to hear from everybody.
Yeah, and if you know of an interesting case that you'd like us to look up and research, that'd be great. Just drop us
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So we're open to hearing from you.
Yeah. So we also have a link tree for everywhere you can follow us down below, or just search up the name. So until next week, stay safe and stay curious.
Bye guys. Bye.